So whether you're working for us in a store in France, or you're working for us in a store here, or you're part of our sourcing team working in Southeast Asia, we're sharing the stories of what it means to be dynamic, and we're highlighting those and we're celebrating them. And that celebration and recognition piece ties in to how we're, I think, sustaining that culture and acknowledging the cultural differences, because what we've really asked leaders and really all colleagues is to recognize each other for our values and behaviors, and really has challenged all of us how to think about how we show up to be great leaders. Really simple tool, but it's a thank you card. And on the back of it, it's what values and behaviors did that person exhibit for the thing that you're thanking them for doing.
And it's interesting to talk about culture, because I don't care if we're talking about national culture, generational culture, professional culture, whatever culture is socialized. Culture is reinforced, whether it's the thank you cards from the leaders or passed down from a senior member of the team to a junior member of the team.
Yeah.
So socialization starts right from the onset, right? From the point when you're bringing folks in, interviewing them, selecting them, and then onboarding them. What are you doing in Primark around onboarding? Welcome to International Business Today, where we discuss the most critical issues in international business with top academic experts and thought leaders. I'm Paula Caligiuri, a professor in the International Business and Strategy Group at Northeastern University's DeMoore McKim School of Business. Today, I am so happy to be joined by John Hadeed. John is the U.S. Vice President of People and Culture at the international retailer Primark. John has had decades of experience in the global retail industry. John, welcome to International Business Today.
Thanks so much, Paul. It's great to be with you.
So decades of experience in the retail industry. Tell us about your career story.
Yeah. So my career started in stores, as many retail journeys do. At age 16, working at a Barnes & Noble, started in the cafe, learning how to make an espresso, and then just progressed from there. I love retail. We have a physical, experiential business. And as an employee, you see the results of your work so tangibly. And it's one of the things that has kept me in retail for so long. I started in stores, as I said, and then moved into operations, and have now spent most of my career in the HR or people and culture space.
Okay. So, but brick and mortar, I mean, retail is changing so much, and certainly brick and mortar is changing a lot. Tell us about the changes you've seen.
Yeah, retail certainly changed over the last 20 plus years. I think we've all experienced the increasing pace of e-commerce and the expectation of greater and more instant satisfaction when you place an order and you get something very quickly. Nowhere is that need satisfied better than in a physical retail store. And regardless of how fast e-commerce has grown, most retail transactions are still happening within a physical store. And we are all about that retail experience at Primark. We run for 450 stores globally right now across 17 countries. And we're about having that amazing experience. So whether you're coming in for the perfect outfit for a job interview, or you're dressing the family for holiday photos, we want you to be able to look good and feel good for less money, with great quality products. And we feel like that experience is best served in a retail environment. So while we continue to think about how we connect with our customers in many different ways, we are so proud and so committed to that physical retail experience.
That's wonderful to hear. And so, I mean, my memory of retail, I also started in retail at 16.
Almost a rite of passage in the US, that first job in the mall.
The day I turned 16, I had my first job. And I remember my first job was with a local department store, Adam Meldrum and Anderson.
Yeah.
It was, and I went from that store to going to see a friend of mine on her lunch break at actually a tuxedo rental place, right? And she wasn't there. I didn't want to get her in trouble. So her manager said, "Can I help you?" I'm like, may I have a job application? And it was funny because she had to be a job application. You handed it out or filled it out on a clipboard. And the next thing I know, I was switching from my Adam Meldrum and Anderson job down the mall to the Tuxedo Junction place because I didn't want to, get my friend in trouble. So I think I'm not unique in that, it's not a job that you normally stay with for a very long time. How do you manage a robust corporate culture, a strong corporate culture, when people are the retention's difficult?
Yeah, I think historically, for many people, especially in the United States, retail is not seen as a career. What I found and what I think we try to help people discover is that actually retail can be an incredibly meaningful career. So you could start on the shop floor at age 16 and you could end up running an entire business like the president of our US business does. He started as a weekend colleague at 16 years old and now runs the US for Primark. So I think what we know that not everyone is going to want a career in retail, just like not everyone is going to want a career in medicine or in law or in other things. But we want to tap into those people with a passion for what we do and help them see the potential of what retail can mean over the long term. And part of how we do that, I think, is by showing that retail is a career that ultimately it's about what you can contribute as an individual. It's about how hard you work. It's about the initiative that you put in. You don't have to have a fancy degree. You don't have to have gone to a particular school. If you're willing to work hard, to learn, to collaborate with others, you can unlock incredible doors. So it all starts there for us. It's also a very fast-paced and exciting industry. And I think that, especially probably for many of our teams in our office, is what is so motivating about it, because every day is different. We're looking at what the trends are 6 months, 12 months, a year from now, and thinking about how do we create product that meets those trends. We're thinking about how do we meet a consumer in a rapidly changing environment where there's more media coming at people from more channels than ever before. And so I think that is particularly attractive to people who like to get excited about solving those kinds of problems and engaging in those kind of opportunities. So, from a marketing perspective, from a product creation perspective, from a sourcing perspective, I mean, we have a massive commitment around Primark Cares and our sustainability agenda. If you care about lessening the impact on the environment, we're a great industry to play in because there's so much opportunity around traceability and product standards and how we make garments and how we make garments more recyclable. So I think there are a lot of things that are incredibly compelling, whether you're in store building that career or whether you're in a role in an office.
It's really wonderful that you're describing all of the things that would attract someone to work, in the retail industry and also for Primark. But talk to me about that a little bit, because attraction's tough.
Yeah.
Especially you're in the midst of U.S. expansion. You're a Dublin-based organization. How are you handling just getting enough people in attraction, right?
In the doors.
Attraction selection are going to be a tough.
Paul, it's one of our biggest challenges because we are 55 years old as a business. We're based in Dublin, as you said, and we've been trading across Europe for decades. We're coming up on our 10-year anniversary here in the US, and people don't know who we are. So for us, the attraction challenge isn't even about why should I work for Primark? It's, well, what is Primark?
Right.
Who are you? And so that's where it starts for us, is telling the story of who we are and why people should even consider us as a brand. And then from there, what does it mean to be a colleague on our team? So for us, when we think about it from a talent attraction perspective, it's about how do we look at all of those channels that we're talking to the population, the consumer through, because that's the first lens. So how are we messaging about the brand from a social perspective, from an in-mall advertising perspective? And then when it comes to the employer brand piece, it's talking about the benefits of working at Primark. What does it mean to have a Primark career? And how is that different maybe than another stop in the mall? How is that something that is going to support you and sustain you and create opportunities for you? And so we really try to tell that Primark story as we then go out and meet candidates.
And I would imagine the differentiator would be career opportunities, as you were describing before.
Yeah, it's definitely one for us. We have a really big commitment around internal growth. So last year we promoted 50% of our leaders internally, and we have a long-term ambition to get that towards 80%.
Wow, 80% is high.
80% is high
for retail.
But we're a business that's built on that. That is, when we talk about culture, internal growth is part of our DNA, and teaching and bringing along the next generation of leaders is part of our DNA. And so when we think about what we bring from our roots in Ireland, that's a big part of who we are and how we're building the culture here and what we want people to experience when they join us.
That's really interesting. I do want to talk about your roots being in Ireland. Yeah. So you're Dublin based. You're in 17
countries.
17 countries
right now
around the world, right? And growing, yep. I know. So how is that in terms of what have the challenges been in your global expansion and in maintaining that similar culture around the world?
Yeah. I think one that I could talk about has actually been, as we've gotten so big and across multiple time zones, cultures, countries, languages, we've had to think more intentionally about how do we describe the Primark culture? If there's something we want to protect, what actually is it? Right? So there's been a piece of work done in the last 18 months actually around defining our values and defining the behaviors that support those. But it was really important that was not a creation of values. We didn't send a committee out to say, what do we want our values to be? It was, let's put words to the things that are really important to us, that have always been there in our DNA. And so for the first time, we have a really strong common language to talk about the fact that at Primark, it's important that we're caring, that we are dynamic in how we show up and in the work that we do, and that we do that together. And those are the three values that form our culture. And the thing is, Paula, they've always formed our culture. We just didn't have the words to talk about it.
And those are consistent around the world.
Around the world. So caring, dynamic, and together are three values. We have 9 behaviors that support those. But what that does is that gives us a language, whether I'm opening a store here in Tennessee, like we'll do next year, or whether a colleague of mine is opening a store in France, like we did yesterday. We have a common language to talk about what does it mean to be part of the Primark team and what does it mean to be successful in the world of Primark.
We have to talk about this. This is international business today, right? So creating the words, certainly, and the behaviors, you can certainly do that.
Yeah.
But what's natural, there's going to be variance, right?
Yeah.
So certainly an American being, happy and approachable and smiling is probably more socialized in our culture versus a culture such as France, as you just named, right? Where a big toothy grin might not be the expectation of a norm there.
Yeah.
And that's cool. That's okay. That's how it should be. So where do you allow for, I'm a cultural agility expert, where do you allow for that variation? And where do you say, nope, these behaviors are non-negotiable?
I think what we've tried to do, it's a really good question. I remember when we were probably 18 months ago when we were having some of these early conversations and the word dynamic was actually on the table. And I said, dynamic can mean many different things. Is dynamic, I'm the loudest and the most boisterous person in the room, I'm a real dynamo? Or is dynamic, I have really creative ways of thinking? What does it mean beyond just the word? And that's what we've really drilled into with our behaviors is not just the word, but what do we expect people to show up like? And you don't have to be the bubbliest personality and you don't have to have a big smile on and be a loud, boisterous American to be dynamic. Dynamic means you think creatively about the work that you do. You push the boundaries and how you show up and how you contribute to our business. So we've defined it through our behaviors. And then I think really importantly, we highlight examples of what that looks like from across the business. And we encourage people to
and around the world,
stories around the world. Absolutely. So whether you're working for us in a store in France, or you're working for us in a store here, or you're part of our sourcing team working in Southeast Asia, we're sharing the stories of what it means to be dynamic, and we're highlighting those and we're celebrating them. And that celebration and recognition piece ties in to how we're, I think, sustaining that culture and acknowledging the cultural differences, because what we've really asked leaders and really all colleagues is to recognize each other for our values and behaviors. And it may sound simple, but we've created these thank you cards. We've got a great culture and leadership team that has helped to accelerate all of this work and really has challenged all of us how to think about how we show up to be great leaders. Really simple tool, but it's a thank you card. And on the back of it, it's what values and behaviors did that person exhibit for the thing that you're thanking them for doing. And that, again, going back to the cultural agility piece and the cross-cultural piece, that doesn't have to be, I'm thanking you for being that loud, boisterous dynamo.
Yeah, right.
I'm thanking you for really challenging the way work happened in your store and living that behavior. So it's the words, but it's also then the examples of what those words mean, because those examples cross borders far more than the English language word dynamic does.
It's so fascinating, because it really comes down to attraction, selection, attrition, like who's attracted to working for Primark, and who's leaving. Ultimately, over time, when we see attraction, selection, attrition over time, is the norms and the values really do start to stabilize, provided there is longevity, there's tenure within the organization. So it really is great that Primark's focusing on retention.
Yeah, and I think, and we've seen that absolutely. I think in the U.S. business in particular over the last 2 years, as we've been really focused on what is our culture. Let's talk about the things that are important. Let's recognize the things that are important. We've seen then attrition come down because we're really clear about what it means to be part of the culture. We're really clear about the value that we place on each individual on our team. And so we've now had, really significant progress around improving our retention, reducing our attrition, however you want to look at it. However you want to look at it, a team that is more stable than it's been before and more connected, I think, to the culture as a result.
And it's interesting to talk about culture, because I don't care if we're talking about national culture, generational culture, professional culture, whatever culture is socialized. Culture is reinforced, whether it's the thank you cards from the leaders or passed down from a senior member of the team to a junior member of the team. Yeah. So socialization starts right from the onset, right? From the point when you're bringing folks in, interviewing them, selecting them, and then onboarding them. What are you doing in Primark around onboarding?
Yeah. I think before I get to the onboarding, just to hit on that piece of it's everyone involved. So we are so clear at Primark that every person impacts culture. And that's kind of the mantra that Adam, who is our head of leadership, has really instilled in the organization, that regardless of where you sit, what you do, and whether you've been with us for one day or 25 years, you impact the culture of this organization. So that then comes to onboarding, comes to induction and how we train people and set up, because from day one, you're part of the culture that we're creating and you have the ability to impact it. And so we invest heavily in new hire. We call it induction. It's a European word that we've borrowed and we've brought over with our colleagues from Ireland. But we invest heavily in new hire induction. So if you're joining us in one of our stores, you're going from between 8 to 26 weeks of training.
You're kidding.
No.
Wow. Are they also working while
they're learning how to do their job while they're doing it? Yeah, it's much of it is on the job, but we have leadership development courses, online learning, cultural experiences all built in there. And even when they're on the job, they're still in their induction period, and we protect it as a training experience because we want to give people time to learn our business and learn how they're doing their jobs and learning who we are. It's an adjustment. I went through a 6-month almost induction when I joined Primark, and there was definitely a point where I was like, please, can I just let me get to work and do my thing? But you never get that time back. And so we really try to protect it for people who join the business.
That's great.
Make sure that they have time to absorb and understand and learn who we are and bring their perspective to us as well.
That's beautiful. And I would imagine that if someone leaves during that period, they weren't meant to be a Primark associate.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
yeah.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit more. I keep going back to this issue of retention because that is a global challenge. And I know you mentioned a lot about, career development and the like. Is there something specific is there or is it a secret of what you're doing to break that?
It's not a secret. But what I would say is the focus is on managers. So it's about, we could offer the best benefits in the world. We could continue to increase people's pay. We could put ping pong tables in our offices. Pick your thing from the menu of, we've got a great culture. But if the person you show up to and work for every day isn't the best manager you've ever had, or isn't working on themselves to become the best manager that they can be, then why are you sticking around? If they're not invested in your growth, if they don't care about the things that are happening in your life, then why should you care about the organization? So we're really focused on how do we create people's best manager, and how do we make sure that the line manager, regardless of the level, is invested in their colleague, whether it's their induction, whether it's their performance reviews, whatever it is. It's those milestones, but the day-to-day are also so important. And that has been probably the biggest focus for us, especially here in the US, is investing in that management development piece, and the expectation that we have for people who manage people.
That's terrific. And I would imagine those managers who ascend in your organization are the best people managers.
We try.
Right.
Listen, and it's also important to acknowledge, I think, especially when I think about corporate roles, to acknowledge where actually you can be phenomenal at something and maybe you're not the best people leader. And that's where I don't think a lot of organizations have cracked the code of, you could be a superstar art director. And in many organizations, progress means you have to take on people working for you. And maybe you're not the best people manager. So how do we continue to create career opportunities and growth and impact for, especially I think on the corporate side, the specialized roles where you can have great impact, but as an individual contributor, what does that look like versus being a people manager? Because I also think it's important to acknowledge,
Ladies ever.
no, some people don't want it.
Right,
Some people
right.
are saying, you know what, that's not what I want. But actually, you can continue to have impact. You can continue to have growth. And how do we continue to support that for people?
Well, that's terrific. So I'm curious, with the global career tracks that you do have, whether the individual contributor track or a leadership track, is there global mobility? Do you still have your team?
We would not be here sitting today, 10 years after opening Primark right down the road, if we didn't have global mobility. So our business has been built on colleagues from one country going to the next, sharing their knowledge, sharing their expertise, sharing their journey with the next wave of colleagues. So we absolutely rooted the American business in, at some point, dozens of individuals from Ireland and the UK and Spain and countries where we've traded for years coming over and helping us to build the business. And if you look back over our history, that's been the journey. We started in Ireland. We then took colleagues from Ireland and they went to the UK when we opened the UK business. And then we took colleagues from Ireland and the UK to Spain. And we've continued that as we've grown across the world. It's been part of how we've embedded our DNA and our culture. Even before we could define what our culture was, how we spread it was by moving people throughout the organization.
Yeah, that's the best of global corporate culture.
Yeah. And we have a really big focus, even just domestically, on mobility within the US, because it's part of how we know we need to spread the culture here. So, we've really started to get excited and see people now moving across the US as we've gone to open stores and created different roles, which again is part of sustaining the culture that we have.
So John, you've been in retail for decades. So stepping away from Primark for a second, what do you see for the future of retail?
Yeah, I think about the continued pace of technological change, whether that's AI, and I'm not the expert on AI, so I'm not going to profess to mean what it means specifically, but AI, automation, the increasing use of technology, expectations around speed, expectations around transparency. There is, I think, so much of that that's going to impact the retail industry, and that companies are also going to look to say, how do we make things faster, better, easier? For me, I think what's really important as we have those conversations and as we look at the future of retail, especially bricks and mortar retail, it's important to me that we continue to center people in those conversations, because ultimately the difference of walking into a store, whether it's a Primark store or another brand, versus sitting at home on your computer, is you have an incredible experience. You're helped by someone who is passionate about what they do. Maybe they give you some style advice that you weren't thinking about. They encouraged you to try that sweater that you just weren't sure of, but you need that then based on people. And so we have to think about the role that people can play in an increasingly tech-enabled world. And how do we help people to adapt to that tech-enabled world? We have a workforce right now that ranges from 16 to 76 working in our stores. How do we help all of those people come along on whatever this tech journey might be? So I think about that as a big focus that has to be for all of us from the retail business perspective.
That is such an important answer, because we're hearing again and again from thought leaders in AI that, what is amazing as this technology will be, there's still soft skills needed for building trust and communicating and collaborating or convincing someone to go ahead and try on that sweater. Boy, retail's a whole lot different than it was for me 40 years ago in my experience. So, John, I just want to kind of close out with advice that you might have for other global leaders who are trying to manage a culture, consistency of a culture, and expand at the same time. So kind of handling both, right? Making sure that you've got that strong values, a strong corporate culture, and also speed. You need to keep expanding. Yeah. So do you have any advice for global leaders?
I think whether it's on the big things or the small things, your annual long-term plan or your to-do list for the day, I think you have to keep anchored to what's important to the business. What are those things that are core to who you are that you won't let go, no matter the speed you're racing at to expand your business or open stores? What are those non-negotiables that are part of your DNA as an organization and part of your DNA as a leader that are super important? So I think having that root of importance is incredibly significant. The other thing is, for me, it's always listening and always learning. I think if you're not asking far more questions than what you're getting from other people, then you're probably not doing enough as a leader. And I probably, if my team watches this later, they're gonna roll their eyes at the number of questions that I might ask them on a given day. But part of that is about getting to really what's happening and what's underneath the surface of what's happening, so that we can make the best informed decisions. We're not going to get everything right all of the time. And I think when you're moving at speed, trying to get the right decisions sometimes holds you back, because you're looking for every single data point. You're looking for every single perfect thing that's going to say this is the right solution. There are very few right solutions, especially in our world. But how do you get towards that best solution? And I think that's asking a lot of questions. It's taking a lot of input from your team. And then coming back, as I said, to what's the most important thing in that given moment, whether it's for the day, whether it's for the year, whether you're looking at how do you scale a business over the long term.
And those are two critical pieces of advice. The know your non-negotiables as an organization. I don't care how fast you need to move,
exactly.
but know those non-negotiables and do those well. And then the second piece is that, leadership humility. Yeah. I do a lot of work in global leadership development. And what we keep finding is that great global leaders have humility in that they know when to ask a lot of questions, just as you're describing.
A lot of questions.
Right.
There are never too many questions, I don't think.
So, John, do you want to tell us any more about where people can go to learn about Primark or?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Primark.com is a great place to start to learn about our business. We've just opened yesterday, actually, our 28th store in the US and our 457th store globally.
Congratulations.
Thank you. You can find us on Instagram at Primark, and we would love people to learn more about us. We're all about creating maximum joy at minimum cost for our customers, for our colleagues, for the planet. And we're growing, and we'd love people to be part of our journey.
John, thank you. This has been terrific. What a great opportunity to learn about Primark.
Thank you so much. It was great to join you, Paula.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us for this episode of International Business Today. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Please know that your 5-star reviews mean the world to us and helps others discover the show. Until next time, stay curious and send us your questions. We'd love to hear from you.